In the heart of a bustling city, nestled between towering skyscrapers and busy streets, stood the headquarters of Crestwood Enterprises. It was one of those places where people hustled from morning till evening, glued to their desks, answering emails, attending meetings, and navigating office politics. For most employees, it was just another corporate job, a mix of ambition, stress, and occasional camaraderie. But for Maya Thompson, this workplace had recently become something else entirely, a battleground. Maya wasn't new to challenges. She had always been someone who pushed through obstacles with determination and grace. As a talented marketing executive, she had earned her spot in the company not because of luck, but because of hard work, creativity, and an ability to connect with clients on a personal level. Her presentations were sharp, her ideas innovative, and her results undeniable. Despite all that, however, Maya often found herself standing out, not necessarily in a good way. You see, Maya was one of the very few black women in a leadership position at Crestwood Enterprises. In a sea of faces that looked remarkably similar, hers stood apart. At first, she thought nothing of it. After all, diversity was supposed to be celebrated, right? But as months went by, subtle signs began to emerge. Some colleagues rolled their eyes when she spoke during meetings. Others whispered behind her back, questioning how she landed such a prestigious role. A couple even made snide remarks about her style or tone, code words that masked deeper prejudices. Still, Maya chose to rise above it. She reminded herself daily that success came with sacrifices, and if ignoring petty comments meant achieving her goals, then so be it. Besides, she loved her job. Marketing was her passion, and she thrived on creating campaigns that resonated with people. So, despite the undercurrents of tension, she continued to pour her energy into her projects, determined to prove her worth, not just to others, but to herself. But little did she know, things were about to take a darker turn. It happened. On a Tuesday afternoon, during one of those dreaded team meetings. The air in the conference room was thick with tension, as it usually was whenever deadlines loomed and expectations ran high. Everyone sat around the large wooden table, laptops open, pens scribbling notes furiously. Maya took her usual seat, near the middle, ready to present updates on her latest campaign. She had spent weeks perfecting every detail, and she was eager to share her progress. As the meeting progressed, the conversation shifted toward recent promotions within the department. Naturally, Maya's name came up. Just a few days earlier, she had received news that she'd been promoted to senior marketing manager, a well-deserved recognition of her efforts. While many congratulated her privately, there were whispers among certain co-workers who felt slighted. They argued that they deserved the promotion more than she did, citing irrelevant metrics or vague claims of seniority. One particular group, led by a man named Greg, grew increasingly vocal. Greg had applied for the same position but hadn't gotten it. Instead of accepting the decision gracefully, he let his bitterness fester. During the meeting, he couldn't resist taking a jab at Maya. "I guess connections matter more than actual performance these days," he muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. The comment stung, but Maya kept her composure. She knew better than to engage in petty arguments, especially in front of the entire team. Instead, she smiled politely and moved on with her presentation, hoping to redirect the focus back to the work itself. Unfortunately, Greg wasn't done yet. Encouraged by nods and murmurs of agreement from his friends, Greg leaned forward, his tone growing more aggressive. "Seriously, though, some people just skate by without putting in the real effort." His gaze locked onto Maya, making it clear who he was referring to. At this point, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Some colleagues exchanged uncomfortable glances while others looked down at their notebooks, avoiding eye contact altogether. Maya, however, remained unfazed. She finished her slides calmly, thanked everyone for their time, and prepared to leave the room. She figured the best response was no response at all, but fate had other plans. Just as Maya stood up to gather her things, Greg suddenly grabbed a can of soda sitting on the table. Whether it was a spur-of-the-moment decision or a calculated move fueled by frustration, no one could say for sure. What happened next was undeniable. With a flick of his wrist, Greg hurled the contents of the can directly at Maya. The cold, sticky liquid splashed across her face, soaking her hair and dripping down her designer blouse. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Gasps filled the room as everyone processed what had just occurred. Maya stood rooted to the spot, her expression unreadable. Shock, embarrassment, and anger swirled inside her, but she refused to give Greg, or anyone else, the satisfaction of seeing her breakdown. Slowly, she reached for a napkin, dabbing at her face and clothes as if trying to erase not only the mess but also the memory of the incident. Greg, realizing the gravity of his actions, started laughing nervously. "Relax, it's just a joke," he said, attempting to brush off the situation. His friends joined in, their laughter echoing awkwardly in the tense silence. But Maya didn't laugh. She didn't yell or cry either. Instead, she squared her shoulders, grabbed her bag, and walked out of the room with quiet dignity. Every step she took resonated with strength, leaving behind a trail of stunned faces and uneasy murmurs. No one realized it then, but that single act of cruelty would set off a chain reaction that none of them could have anticipated. For now, though, the office buzzed with gossip, speculating about what would happen next. Would Maya report the incident? Would Greg face consequences? Or would everything blow over, buried under layers of denial and excuses? What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that Maya's husband, Marcus Thompson, was about to step into the picture. And when he did, nothing would ever be the same again. By the time Maya reached home that evening, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. The events of the day replayed in her head like a broken record. Greg's snide remarks, the laughter from his friends, and finally, the humiliating splash of soda. She felt anger bubbling beneath the surface, but more than anything, she felt tired. Tired of having to prove herself over and over again. Tired of being treated differently because of the color of her skin, and tired of pretending that none of it mattered. When she walked through the door, Marcus immediately noticed something was off. Normally, Maya greeted him with a warm smile or an enthusiastic hug after work. Today, however, she hung her bag on the coat rack without saying a word and headed straight for the kitchen. Her movements were slow, deliberate, as if every step required extra effort. "Hey," Marcus called out softly, following her into the kitchen. "You okay? You seem quiet." Maya hesitated, her back still turned to him. For a moment, she considered brushing it off, telling him everything was fine. After all, she hated burdening others with her problems. But Marcus wasn't just anyone. He was her partner, her confidant, the person who had stood by her side through thick and thin. If there was anyone she could trust with this, it was him. Taking a deep breath, she turned around to face him. "Marcus," she began, her voice steady, despite the storm inside her. "Something happened at work today." As she recounted the incident, the insults, the laughter, the soda splashing across her face, Marcus listened intently. His expression remained calm, but his eyes betrayed the fury building within him. He clenched his fists tightly, resisting the urge to lash out then and there. When Maya finished speaking, tears glistened in her eyes, though she refused to let them fall. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," Marcus said finally, his tone low and measured. "But I promise you one thing, no one treats my wife like that and gets away with it." Maya sighed, shaking her head slightly. "I don't want you making a scene, Marcus. It's not worth it. Besides, it's not the first time something like this has happened." That last sentence hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean, not the first time?" he demanded, his voice rising slightly. "Has this been going on for a while?" She hesitated before nodding. "Not exactly like today, but there have been comments, looks, things that made me feel out of place. I didn't say anything because I thought I could handle it, but maybe I can't anymore." Hearing those words broke Marcus's heart. He knew Maya was strong, incredibly so, but even the strongest people had their limits, and today someone had crossed hers. Someone had dared to humiliate her in front of her peers, treating her like she was less than human. That thought alone ignited a fire in Marcus's chest, one that wouldn't be extinguished anytime soon. He paced back and forth in the living room, trying to process everything Maya had told him. His mind raced with possibilities. Should he call the CEO directly, file a formal complaint, or march into the office tomorrow and confront Greg himself? Each option seemed tempting, but Marcus knew he needed to approach this strategically. Impulsiveness might make him feel better in the short term, but it wouldn't guarantee justice for Maya. After several minutes of silent deliberation, Marcus stopped pacing and looked at Maya. "Do you still have any evidence of what happened? Security footage, witness statements, anything?" Maya nodded. "There are cameras in the conference room. HR already reviewed the footage earlier today. They said they'd investigate, but honestly, I don't expect much to come of it." Marcus frowned. "We'll see about that." With determination etched onto his face, Marcus grabbed his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he was looking for. It belonged to Richard Langston, the CEO of Crestwood Enterprises. While Marcus and Richard weren't close friends, they had crossed paths several times at industry events and mutual business dealings. Marcus respected Richard as a leader, but tonight, respect would take a backseat to accountability. The phone rang twice before Richard answered. "Marcus, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Marcus didn't waste time exchanging pleasantries. "Richard, we need to talk. Something unacceptable happened at your company today, and I want to make sure it's handled properly." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Unacceptable? What do you mean?" Marcus explained the situation briefly, leaving out no details. He described how Maya had been targeted, insulted, and physically assaulted, all while her colleagues laughed and did nothing to intervene. By the time he finished, Richard sounded shocked and apologetic. "Marcus, I had no idea this happened. Believe me, we'll look into it immediately," Richard assured him. "But why didn't Maya report it sooner?" "She did," Marcus replied sharply. "And apparently your HR department is dragging its feet. That's why I'm calling you, directly. This isn't just some minor workplace dispute, it's discrimination, plain and simple. And if it's not dealt with swiftly and decisively, I won't hesitate to escalate the matter further." Richard stammered, clearly caught off guard by Marcus's intensity. Of course, we'll handle it right away, you have my word." Satisfied for now, Marcus ended the call and turned to Maya. "They're going to investigate, but I'm not leaving this up to chance. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to the office myself. I'll make sure everyone involved pays for what they've done." Maya's eyes widened in alarm. "Marcus, please don't. I don't want this to blow up any more than it already has. Can't we just move on?" "No," Marcus said firmly. "This isn't just about you anymore. It's about sending a message to Crestwood, to Greg, and to anyone else who thinks they can mistreat someone based on their race or gender. You deserve better than this, Maya, and I'm going to make sure you get it." Despite her reservations, Maya couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Marcus had always been her rock, her protector, and his unwavering support gave her strength when she needed it most. Still, part of her worried about the fallout. Would Marcus's involvement make things worse? Could it damage her reputation at work? As if reading her thoughts, Marcus pulled her into a tight embrace. "Don't worry," he murmured. "I'll fix this, I promise." For the rest of the night, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about what he'd learned. He replayed Maya's story in his mind, imagining how she must have felt sitting in that conference room, surrounded by people who should have supported her, but instead chose to laugh at her expense. Every time he thought about it, his blood boiled. How could anyone treat another human being with such disrespect? Determined to prepare for the next day, Marcus spent hours researching Crestwood Enterprises' policies on workplace conduct. He read through employee handbooks, scoured online reviews, and even reached out to a few former employees for insights. What he discovered only fueled his resolve. Crestwood had a long history of sweeping issues under the rug, prioritizing profits over people. It was clear that systemic change was needed, and Marcus intended to be the catalyst. By the time morning arrived, Marcus was ready. Dressed in a sharp navy blue suit that screamed authority, he kissed Maya goodbye and headed to Crestwood Enterprises. As he stepped out of his car and approached the gleaming glass building, he felt a surge of purpose. Today wasn't just about seeking revenge, it was about standing up for justice. And Marcus Thompson never backed down from a fight. The moment Marcus Thompson walked into Crestwood Enterprises, heads turned. His presence commanded attention, not just because of his sharp suit or confident stride, but because everyone seemed to know who he was. Whispers rippled through the office-like waves. "Is that the Marcus Thompson? What's he doing here? Oh no, this can't be good." Employees scrambled to tidy their desks and straighten their ties, though it was clear they were unprepared for what was about to unfold. For most people, seeing a billionaire step into their workplace felt surreal, like watching a celebrity walk onto the set of an ordinary TV show. But for those involved in yesterday's incident, there was no mistaking the tension in the air. Something big was coming, and they could feel it. Marcus didn't waste time on pleasantries. He bypassed the reception desk entirely, ignoring the startled looks from the staff, and headed straight toward the executive wing. Security guards tried to stop him, asking if he had an appointment, but one glance at his expression silenced them. "Tell Richard Langston I'm here," Marcus said firmly. Within minutes, word reached the CEO, and soon enough Richard himself appeared, looking flustered but trying to maintain composure. "Marcus," Richard greeted him with a forced smile, extending his hand. "Come on in, let's talk." But Marcus shook his head. "Not yet. First, I want to see the conference room where it happened, the exact spot where my wife was humiliated in front of her colleagues. Then we'll talk." Richard hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, but nodded. "Of course. Follow me." As they made their way to the conference room, employees practically pressed themselves against the walls to avoid crossing paths with Marcus. Some peeked out from behind cubicle partitions, while others pretended to be engrossed in their computer screens. The atmosphere was electric, charged with anticipation and fear. Everyone knew this wasn't a routine visit. It was a reckoning. When they arrived at the conference room, Marcus paused in the doorway, taking in the space. The large wooden table still bore faint stains from spilled coffee cups and sticky notes, scattered across its surface. It looked like any other corporate meeting room, sterile and impersonal. Yet to Marcus it represented something far darker, a place where dignity had been stripped away, where cruelty had masqueraded as humor. He turned to Richard. "Show me the security footage." Without argument, Richard led him to a nearby office, where HR personnel kept records of surveillance videos. As they played back the tape, Marcus watched intently, his jaw tightening with every second. There it was, the snide comments, the laughter, and finally the moment Greg hurled the soda at Maya. Watching it unfold again, even on a screen, filled him with rage. How could anyone think this was acceptable behavior? How could anyone laugh? Once the video ended, Marcus stood up abruptly. "I want names," he said, his voice low but authoritative. "Every single person involved in this, Greg, his friends, anyone who laughed or egged him on. And don't leave out the ones who sat there silently letting it happen. Their silence makes them complicit." Richard shifted uneasily. "Marcus, I understand your anger, but these are valued employees. We need to handle this carefully." "Carefully?" Marcus interrupted, his tone sharp. "You mean sweep it under the rug like you always do?" "No, Richard. This ends now. If you won't take action, I will." With that, Marcus stormed out of the office, leaving Richard scrambling to keep up. They returned to the main floor, where Marcus called for an emergency meeting. Word spread quickly, and within minutes the entire department gathered in the largest conference room. Employees filed in nervously, unsure whether to sit or stand, glancing around for clues about what was happening. When Marcus entered, the room fell silent. Even Greg, who had initially smirked at the idea of facing consequences, paled visibly as Marcus locked eyes with him. Standing at the front of the room, Marcus addressed the crowd without hesitation. "I came here today not as a businessman or an investor, but as a husband," he began, his voice steady and commanding. "Yesterday, my wife, your colleague, was subjected to an act of discrimination and cruelty that should never have occurred in any professional setting. What happened wasn't just an isolated incident. It's symptomatic of a culture that allows prejudice and disrespect to fester unchecked. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. Some of you may think this is none of my business, but when someone attacks my family, it becomes very personal. So let me make one thing clear. I won't tolerate this kind of behavior. Not in my life, and certainly not in any company I have influence over. At this point, several employees exchanged uneasy glances. While many weren't aware of Marcus's connection to Crestwood beyond his friendship with Richard, rumors had started circulating that he held significant shares in the company. Now, hearing him confirm his involvement sent shockwaves through the room. I've reviewed the security footage, Marcus continued, and I know exactly who was involved. Greg, stand up. For a moment, Greg froze, his face turning red as all eyes turned to him. Slowly, reluctantly, he rose to his feet, avoiding direct eye contact with Marcus. You threw a drink at my wife, Marcus stated plainly. Why? Greg stammered, clearly unprepared for such a direct confrontation. I didn't mean anything by it. It was just a joke. A joke? Marcus cut him off, his voice rising slightly. Do you think humiliating someone in front of their peers is funny? Do you think it's okay to treat a black woman with less respect than anyone else in this room? Greg opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, he sank back into his chair, defeated. Marcus scanned the room, his gaze piercing. And what about the rest of you? Did anyone speak up? Did anyone defend Maya when this happened? Or did you sit there laughing, pretending it was harmless? Entertainment. The silence that followed was deafening. A few people squirmed uncomfortably while others stared at the floor, ashamed. Marcus nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already suspected. This isn't just about Greg, he said. It's about all of you. Every single person who witnessed this and did nothing enabled it to happen. That makes you part of the problem. Turning to Richard, Marcus added, I want immediate action. Terminate Greg and anyone else directly involved in this incident. As for the rest of the department, mandatory sensitivity training starts next week, and I expect regular updates on how you plan to address systemic issues within this company. Richard nodded hastily, knowing better than to argue. Consider it done, Marcus. You have my word. As Marcus left the room, the weight of his presence lingered behind him. Employees whispered among themselves, some expressing relief that they hadn't been singled out, others vowing to change their behavior moving forward. Whatever the case, one thing was certain. Things at Crestwood Enterprises would never be the same again. For Maya, justice was finally within reach. And for Marcus, this was only the beginning. The fallout from Marcus Thompson's visit to Crestwood Enterprises was swift and undeniable. By the end of that very day, the office buzzed with a mix of fear, disbelief, and quiet satisfaction. Word spread like wildfire about what had transpired in the conference room, how Marcus had confronted Greg and the others involved, how he'd demanded accountability not just for the perpetrators but for everyone who had stood by silently. It wasn't just gossip, it was a reckoning. Greg, once cocky and self-assured, now looked like a shadow of his former self. His smug demeanor had been replaced by a pale, hollow expression as HR called him into their office to deliver the news. He was fired, effective immediately. No severance package, no glowing recommendation letters, just a security escort out of the building with a box containing his personal belongings. As Greg walked through the office for the last time, heads turned away, avoiding eye contact. Some felt a pang of sympathy, but most were relieved to see him go. But Greg wasn't the only one facing consequences. Two of his closest allies who had laughed and egged him on during the incident also received termination notices. Their protests fell on deaf ears. We didn't throw the drink, one of them argued desperately, but HR remained firm. You enabled the behavior, they explained. And enabling is just as damaging as participating. Meanwhile, other employees found themselves summoned to meetings with senior management. These sessions weren't optional, they were mandatory, and they came with stern warnings about future conduct. Those who had laughed or stayed silent during the incident were given written reprimands, which would remain on their records for at least a year. For some, this meant missed opportunities for promotions or raises. Others realized they'd dodged a bullet simply by not being directly implicated. But the message was clear. Complicity wouldn't be tolerated anymore. Richard Langston, the CEO, knew he had to act decisively if he wanted to salvage Crestwood's reputation. He called an emergency board meeting later that afternoon, where Marcus made good on his earlier threat to leverage his influence. Unbeknownst to many employees, Marcus held significant shares in Crestwood Enterprises, a fact Richard hadn't fully appreciated until now. Armed with data, evidence, and sheer determination, Marcus laid out exactly why sweeping changes were necessary. "This isn't just about punishing bad behavior," Marcus told the board members, his voice calm but unyielding. "It's about creating a workplace culture where people feel safe, respected, and valued. Right now, Crestwood is failing miserably at that. If we don't fix it, I'll use my position as a shareholder to ensure that leadership changes, from top to bottom." The boardroom went silent. No one dared argue with Marcus, not when he presented such a compelling case. Within hours, several high-level executives, including the head of HR, resigned under pressure. Their departures sent shockwaves throughout the company, signaling that no one was untouchable. The new interim HR director, handpicked by Marcus, wasted no time implementing reforms. Mandatory sensitivity training programs were scheduled for every employee, regardless of rank or tenure. Anonymous reporting systems were introduced to allow staff to flag inappropriate behavior without fear of retaliation, and diversity initiatives became a central focus with goals tied directly to performance evaluations. For Maya, watching these changes unfold was both empowering and surreal. She hadn't asked Marcus to intervene, at least not explicitly, but she couldn't deny the sense of relief that washed over her as justice unfolded. Still, she worried about backlash. Would her colleagues resent her for what happened? Would they blame her for the firings and policy changes? Her fears weren't entirely unfounded. In the days following Marcus's visit, whispers circulated around the office. Some praised Maya for having the courage to speak up, while others muttered under their breath about favoritism and overreaction. But Maya refused to let negativity consume her. Instead, she leaned on Marcus, drawing strength from his unwavering support. "They can say whatever they want," he reminded her, one evening over dinner. "What matters is that you stood your ground, and now you're helping create a better environment for everyone." Maya nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She decided to take a short leave of absence, not because she was afraid, but because she needed time to process everything that had happened. During her break, she focused on self-care, spending hours journaling, meditating, and reconnecting with friends and family. Slowly but surely, she began to heal. Back at Crestwood, the transformation continued. Employees attended workshops led by experts on workplace inclusion, learning how to recognize unconscious biases and foster respectful communication. Posters with messages like "Respect starts here" adorned the walls, serving as constant reminders of the company's new values. Even small gestures like celebrating cultural holidays or hosting panel discussions on diversity helped shift the overall tone of the workplace. But perhaps the most surprising development came from within the ranks of Crestwood's employees themselves. Inspired by Maya's resilience and emboldened by the recent shakeup, several team members formed a grassroots group dedicated to promoting equity and inclusion. They called themselves Crestwood United, and their mission was simple: to ensure that incidents like the one involving Maya never happened again. Through monthly meetings, open forums, and collaborative projects, Crestwood United worked tirelessly to hold leadership accountable and amplify marginalized voices. By the time Maya returned to work weeks later, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Colleagues greeted her warmly, offering sincere apologies for past behaviors. One woman even approached her tearfully, confessing that she wished she'd spoken up sooner. "I'm so sorry for staying quiet," she said. "I promise to do better, moving forward." Maya smiled, touched by the gesture. "Thank you," she replied softly. "That means a lot." Of course, not everything changed overnight. Old habits die hard and some lingering tensions remained. But there was progress, and that, Maya realized, was worth celebrating. She threw herself back into her work with renewed energy, channeling her experiences into innovative marketing campaigns that highlighted themes of unity and empowerment. Her efforts earned rave reviews from clients and colleagues alike, solidifying her status as a leader who inspired change both inside and outside the boardroom. As for Marcus, he took pride in knowing he'd played a role in dismantling a toxic system. He didn't seek recognition or applause. For him, seeing Maya thrive in a healthier workplace was reward enough. Still, the experience left a lasting impact on him too. It reinforced his belief in using power responsibly, not to dominate or control, but to uplift and protect those who needed it most. Word of Crestwood's overhaul spread beyond the company, sparking conversations across industries. Articles appeared in business journals highlighting the importance of addressing discrimination and fostering inclusive environments. Other companies began reaching out to Crestwood for advice, eager to learn how they could implement similar reforms. What started as a single act of cruelty had evolved into a movement, one that proved that accountability, when wielded thoughtfully, could spark meaningful change. In the end, the story of Maya and Marcus became more than just a tale of revenge or retribution. It was a testament to the power of standing up for what's right, even when it feels impossible. It showed that love, loyalty, and integrity could overcome prejudice and apathy. And it reminded everyone, both at Crestwood and beyond, that true leadership isn't about wielding authority. It's about creating spaces where everyone can succeed. Months passed since the dramatic events at Crestwood Enterprises, and the transformation within the company was undeniable. What had once been a workplace riddled with tension, discrimination, and unchecked biases had begun to evolve into something far more positive. While change didn't happen overnight, and there were still moments of discomfort as old habits slowly faded, it was clear that a new chapter had begun. And at the heart of this transformation stood Maya Thompson, whose courage and resilience became an inspiration for everyone around her. When Maya returned from her leave of absence, she found herself stepping into a role she hadn't anticipated, that of a leader not just in title, but in spirit. Employees looked to her not only for guidance on marketing strategies but also for advice on navigating difficult conversations about race, equity, and inclusion. Her presence alone served as a reminder of what could be achieved when someone refused to stay silent in the face of injustice. One afternoon, during a team meeting, Maya shared a story that left the room in stunned silence. She spoke candidly about her experiences leading up to the infamous incident, the subtle microaggressions, the dismissive comments, the feeling of being othered, despite her contributions to the company. For many of her colleagues, it was the first time they truly understood the weight of what she had endured. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others nodded in understanding, visibly moved by her words. "I'm telling you this, not because I want pity," Maya said softly, her voice steady yet filled with emotion, "but because I believe we can learn from each other. You might think one comment or one laugh doesn't matter, but trust me, it adds up. And if we don't address these small things, they grow into bigger problems." Her honesty resonated deeply with the team. It sparked a wave of reflection and accountability that rippled throughout the organization. People started paying closer attention to their own actions and words, asking themselves whether they were contributing to a culture of respect or perpetuating harm. Slowly but surely, attitudes began to shift. Meanwhile, the grassroots group, Crestwood United, continued to gain momentum. What had started as a small initiative led by a handful of employees blossomed into a powerful force for change. They organized workshops, hosted guest speakers, and created safe spaces for open dialogue. One of their most impactful projects was a monthly newsletter called Voices of Crestwood, which featured personal stories from employees of diverse backgrounds. Each edition highlighted different perspectives, fostering empathy and connection among coworkers who might otherwise never have interacted outside of work-related tasks. The newsletter quickly became one of the most anticipated communications in the office. Employees eagerly awaited its release, often discussing the featured stories over coffee or during breaks. For Maya, seeing how eager people were to listen and learn filled her with hope. She realized that while the journey toward true equality was long, every step forward mattered. Marcus, too, remained actively involved in supporting Crestwood's evolution. Though his initial intervention had been driven by anger and protectiveness, he soon recognized the broader implications of what they were achieving. He began using his platform to advocate for similar reforms across industries, speaking at conferences and sharing Crestwood's story as a case study in accountability and transformation. His message was simple yet profound. Power isn't meant to dominate, it's meant to uplift. Use yours wisely. As word of Crestwood's overhaul spread, the company earned recognition as a leader in workplace inclusivity. Business magazines published articles praising their efforts, and industry leaders reached out seeking advice on implementing similar changes. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. What had started as a scandal became a blueprint for success. Crestwood Enterprises wasn't just surviving, it was thriving, thanks in large part to the cultural shift that had taken root. For Maya and Marcus, the experience brought them even closer together. They often reflected on how far they'd come since that fateful day when everything seemed so bleak. Sitting on their balcony one evening, glasses of wine in hand, they talked about the future. "You know," Marcus said thoughtfully, "I never imagined I'd play such a direct role in fixing a workplace issue. But seeing how much has changed, it makes me proud." Maya smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "And I never imagined I'd inspire so many people. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough, though. There's still so much work to be done, not just here, but everywhere." Marcus nodded. "True. But remember, you're planting seeds. Change takes time, but those seeds will grow. Look at how far Crestwood has come already." Indeed, the seeds of change were sprouting in unexpected ways. Former employees who had left Crestwood due to toxic environments began reaching out, expressing gratitude for the reforms, and even considering returning. Clients praised the company's renewed focus on values-driven leadership, leading to stronger partnerships and increased revenue. Even competitors took note, adopting some of Crestwood's initiatives in their own organizations. But perhaps the most profound impact was felt internally. Employees who had once feared speaking up now felt empowered to share their ideas and concerns without hesitation. Teams collaborated more effectively, free from the tension that had once stifled creativity, and Maya, once seen as an outsider, became a beloved figure, a symbol of strength, grace, and perseverance. As the months turned into years, Crestwood Enterprises continued to evolve. The company wasn't perfect, no organization ever is, but it had set a standard for what was possible when leadership committed to real, meaningful change. Maya eventually rose to the position of Vice President of Marketing, overseeing campaigns that celebrated diversity and challenged societal norms. Under her guidance, Crestwood launched several award-winning projects that promoted inclusivity, earning accolades from both consumers and critics alike. Looking back, Maya often thought about the ripple effect of that single act of cruelty. The soda splashing across her face, the laughter that followed. In a way, it had been the catalyst for everything good that came afterward. Without it, she might never have found her voice, and Crestwood might never have transformed into the beacon of progress it had become. And Marcus? He couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet satisfaction. Not because he had wielded his power to punish those who had wronged Maya, but because he had used it to create something lasting and meaningful. Together, he and Maya proved that love, integrity, and determination could overcome even the darkest challenges. In the end, their story wasn't just about revenge or justice, it was about hope. Hope that no matter how broken a system might seem, it could always be repaired with enough courage and commitment. Hope that even in the face of adversity, kindness and resilience could prevail. And hope that one day workplaces everywhere would reflect the values Crestwood had fought so hard to embody: respect, equity, and unity. It was a legacy worth fighting for, and one that Maya and Marcus would carry with them for the rest of their lives.